Welcome to the Sam Pebbles podcast. Our guest, Gary K. Wolfe, who's a writer. Well-known book was Who Censored Roger Rabbit in 1981. I invited you on here because upcoming Memorial Day, and I know
Oh,
you're
yeah,
a
sure.
veteran, so I don't know how much you want to tell us about your background.
I'll tell you a little bit. I grew up in a little farm town in Illinois, and the heroes in that town were the military guys. We had people who had fought in World War II. We had a number of Air Force officers. We had a lot of people who were killed in World War II. And for me, that was always a an admirable profession. Being a soldier was an admirable profession. I watched in my era. I watched a lot of John Wayne war movies and just war movies in general. The Steel Helmet and Sands of Iwo Jima, stuff that really glorified soldiers and glorified war, and was what I always wanted to be. I always wanted to be an Air Force career officer. So when I went to college, I went through ROTC and joined the Air Force immediately after college with the intention of making the Air Force my career. I became an Air Force commando. Went to Vietnam, got 2 Air Medals and the Bronze Star. But war wasn't quite as glamorous as the movies made it out to be. And I just kind of lost interest in a military career. I support our troops 100%. My nephew is a W-2 warrant officer in the Army, and it took him when he was a callow youth. He was kind of drifting. The Army took him and made him a man, and really did him a lot of good. And I see a lot of boys who are in the military, and the military is doing them a lot of good. I support the troops. I don't necessarily support all of the wars that they're fighting, but I give them all a hearty thanks for your service on Memorial Day. They deserve it.
All right, thank you very much, sir. If there's anything you think I should have asked and I left out, or if there's anything you want to say on aesthetics, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
When I went back to school, I got a master's degree after I got out of the service, and I took a lot of journalism classes, and that's the question that they always tell you. After you finish, you ask them, well, is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't? And sometimes they'll answer. They'll give you some, oddball thing that they would never think of. And I will tell you about the one time when that kind of came back to bite me in the butt. I was making the Roger Rabbit movie, and the original Who Censored Roger Rabbit book was printed in pretty small quantities. And whenever somebody would write to me and say, I really liked your book, the publisher gave me 50 copies, and whenever somebody wrote me and said, I really like your book, I would send them a copy. I'd autograph it and send them a copy. And pretty soon I was out of books. I had no copies of my own book. And, it didn't bother me. I mean, it made a lot of people happy. But when we were making the Roger Rabbit movie, Steve Spielberg came to me, and he said, I read your book when it first came out, but I don't have it. He said, I really would love to have an autographed first edition. And, Steve Spielberg, well, I had none. So I had to go to an antique used book dealer, and I paid $350 for a copy of my own book so that I could autograph it and give it to Steve Spielberg. Well, I told him, now this is my personal library. Can't tell Steve Spielberg that you got him a used book, right? So years go by, and the movies come out, and I am giving a talk at my cousin, who was a teacher and librarian in the Midwest. I was giving a talk to her 3rd grade class. And afterwards, this little 3rd grader comes up to me. He was so cute. He said, I do this newsletter for the school. They did it on a mimeograph, which doesn't even exist anymore. And he said, would you give me an interview? And I said, yeah. And, he asked me kind of questions a 3rd grader would ask. And then I told him, I said, look, if you're going to be a real journalist, I said, the last thing you should ask is there anything that you can tell me that I didn't ask that you've never told anybody before? And so he took it to heart. He said to me, Mr. Wolfe, is there anything you'd ever tell me that you've never told anybody before? And I figured, 3rd grade kid. So I told him the Steve Spielberg story, right? And he prints it in his little, 3rd grade mimeograph newsletter, right, for the whole school to read. Cute. But it turns out that his father was a stringer for the Associated Press. His father saw that story and put it on the wire, and it went national. And every paper in the country picked it up and told the story about how I had gotten Steve Spielberg a used book. Well, I never heard from Spielberg about it, but of those 50 people that I had sent that book to, 35 of them sent it back. And they said, you should not be without a copy of your own book. So, in answer to your question, I guess that's the answer to your question.